Hi, everybody. Today is Friday, October 17th, 2025, and our dear friends, Larry Johnson and Colonel Wilkerson, are back with us. Welcome back.
Hey there, well, man. You get the shirt. You get the shirt victory today, dude.
This is
Larry, what are you doing in Russia?
I'm attending
What
the
are you
20th
doing there?
the 20th anniversary of RT Russia Today. So they're celebrating, and I started appearing on Russia Today. Oh, geez, no, well, about 10 years ago. So yeah, and what's interesting is I once trolled Brian Stelter at CNN because he was saying, "Oh, you're working for this Russian mouthpiece." Well, not I don't work for him. I don't get paid by it. But I just pointed out to Brian. I said, every whether I was on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, CBS, NBC, ABC, I did them all. Jim Lehrer NewsHour did that. CBC, BBC. The only ones that never did a pre-interview that wanted to find out what I had to say in advance was RT and Iranian Press TV. Those two never do a pre-interview. They say whatever you're going to say, you're going to say. You have, and they don't tell you in advance. This is all you can only say this thing. Nope, never. So you have to come to Russia to find freedom of speech.
I started with RT when they were on K Street in a studio way up, and I had to go through the apparatus to get up there. The elevator wouldn't let me out on their floor. They had to get that fixed. But you're right. You're right. I find Al Jazeera pretty much the same way too. They've never done a pre-interview with me. Might change now that their leadership just changed, but I understand that's only the Arabic part of it. So the English part. My next door neighbor's Al Jazeera staff member. So I talked to him about it all the time, and he said the Arabic changes won't make much difference to the English version.
Yeah. Larry, let's start with you. And you're in Russia, and you understand the atmosphere, the tone in Russia. The day before yesterday, we had Donald Trump coming out and talking about sending Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine and threatening India, China. Even he said India promised him not to buy China Russian oil. And yesterday there was a phone call. Vladimir Putin called Donald Trump, and here is what Donald Trump said in terms of the use of Tomahawk missiles and sending them to Ukraine.
It a little bit, didn't say much, but I do say to you, we need Tomahawks for the United States of America too. We have a lot of them, but we need them. I mean, we can't deplete for our country. So, they're very vital. They're very powerful. They're very accurate. They're very good, but we need them too.
But did President Putin try to dissuade you from selling Tomahawk missiles?
Well, of course. What do you think he's going to say? Please sell Tomahawks?
No, but
Is he going to say, please sell those Tomahawks? I really appreciate it. I did actually say, would you mind if I gave a couple of thousand Tomahawks to your opposition? I did say that to him. I said it just that way. He didn't like the idea. He really didn't like the idea. No, I said it that way. You have to be a little bit lighthearted sometimes, but no, he doesn't want Tomahawk. Tomahawk is a vicious weapon. It's a vicious, offensive, incredibly destructive weapon. Nobody wants Tomahawk shot at him.
Yeah.
Larry, go ahead.
I know what he's talking about. But
That's an absolute lie. Absolutely. It's a point weapon, unless it's got a nuclear warhead.
Yeah, have Andrei Martyanov. He did an analysis the other day, pointing out that he pulled up the map of one refinery in Russia, and Andrei's got a good math background as a result of his military education. He calculated it would take a minimum of 100 Tomahawks to destroy that oil refinery, to render it inoperative. 100. We don't have 100. Trump, the most he could possibly scrape up would maybe 50. So this is going to do nothing other than perhaps irritate the Russians. And what it will do is, if he does deploy it, it is going to create enormous political pressure in Russia for Russia to strike back and strike back at the United States. Not just strike back at Ukraine, but strike back at the United States, because this will be seen as another direct attack by the United States on Russia. So that much, I'm certain.
Colonel, I don't know the quality of these talks that Donald Trump is having with Vladimir Putin, but the outcome every time that there is a phone call, there is a meeting, he says that it was all productive, positive, but in a couple of days, you see Donald Trump changing totally the tone, the outcome that he was talking about it in the aftermath. What is going on with the United States under the Trump administration?
The same thing that normally goes on with it. He brags, he boasts, he says things, retracts them the next day often. And the things that he says, and even when he retracts them, don't really mean very much. And just back to Tomahawk for a minute, I've belabored this with dozens of people, but Tomahawk is a point attack weapon. It's for bunkers and things like that in its conventional stage. Out in the Pacific, when we got it in the early 80s, we didn't even want it because our mission was to distract the Western Front Russians, Soviets who were attacking, and make them divert forces to Kamchatka, Sea of Okhotsk, places like that. And we knew that Tomahawk wouldn't do that. So we wanted the D model, the nuclear warhead model. Vesey and Reagan disapproved it for obvious political reasons, but that's what we wanted for our war plan. Fast forward to today, not much has changed in Tomahawk. There have been a few upgrades, but it's still a point weapon. Trump shot 52 at Syria, forewarned the Russians that he was going to do that, to be true. But the damage was such that we couldn't even detect it on satellite photography unless we look really, really closely. You don't get a whole lot with Tomahawk, except you threaten nuclear weapons, because when it's flying in on you, you don't know what kind of warhead it is. And that's very destabilizing. As to Trump, he's meeting with Zelensky, as I understand it today. He's just had his very productive telephone conversation with Putin. What's he going to tell Z-Boy? That's the big question. What's he going to tell him? Is he going to be rough with him? Is he going to be middle of the road with him? Is he going to be easy with him? Is he going to tell him more lies? What's he going to do? This man doesn't know how to negotiate. This man of the deal, this man of the art of the deal, doesn't know how to negotiate, let alone know history and how to effect decent diplomacy. So who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Larry, the problem, it seems, that is Europeans. It's not Zelensky himself, because Zelensky, I don't see Donald Trump caring about Zelensky and his administration. But what is the main problem is the European case, the Europeans somehow pushing for the continuation of the conflict.
Right. Well, but they have no capability to support it. They don't have an industrial capability. They have very, very limited military capabilities. Nothing that could cause any kind of change on the battlefield. And I think it's important that again, there's going to be this raising of expectations in the West about what's going to happen in Budapest next week. Putin's position is very, very simple, and it's not complicated, and he's not going to surrender on any of these points. Point number one, that the West must recognize Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk as permanent parts of the Federal Republic of Russia, as well as Crimea. Crimea is now permanently part of Russia. Recognize that. Agree that there will be no role for NATO whatsoever in Ukraine, and that NATO forces will be withdrawn from Ukraine going forward. Those are the two critical demands. And then the third one will be that there have to be no elections. There have to be elections finally in Ukraine, but not with the Banderites, the neo-Nazis in charge. And if Trump or any of his advisors think that Putin can be convinced to relent on any of those points, they don't know Putin. I mean, frankly, if Putin made any of those kinds of concessions, he might very well be overthrown. But that it's not going to happen. Putin is not the sole decision maker, even though that's how we like to portray him in the West. There is he's got a significant military support in the general staff, and then he's got the likes of Lavrov and Rybkov in the foreign ministry. So this thing is he's going to reiterate Russia's demands, and Trump's either going to listen or do what he did in Alaska and not pay attention.
Yeah, it seems that in the last meeting, Donald Trump tried to, negotiate with Vladimir Putin the way that he's going to ease the sanctions, and Vladimir Putin should accept the ceasefire, based on the current front line between the two colonels. Do you think that would be the same position in the new negotiation, new talks that they're planning for?
Donald better start watching what's happening with his buddies over there in the EU. Yesterday, they just passed, and it's got to go through a really pro forma check with I think it's called the Ukraine-EU Association, a rule essentially for the EU that would demand that all EU countries accept Ukrainian grain and other products with no tariff, import duties, or anything else. Poland is going to roll over and play dead to that one. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
This is devastating to the farmers in the EU. And that's the kind of thing the EU is doing now to try and, reinforce their message of we're against Moscow and we're for Ukraine. That's disastrous. So this is just going downhill rapidly. It's like a snowball going downhill. And Larry's absolutely right. All Putin's got to do is keep on. He's already won. And pretty soon he's going to turn the lights out in Ukraine, completely turn the lights out. So they'll have to operate their tomahawks by flashlight.
Larry, FSB, director of FSB in Russia, if I'm not mistaken, FSB, the intelligence in Russia gave information about that the British and Ukrainians are planning to sabotage in Turkish stream, the pipeline of Turkey. What is that? Do you think these people with this sort of mindset, they're planning to put an end to the conflict? I don't see that happening in the mind of Europeans.
Yeah, no, they're desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. Europe right now is the equivalent of a drowning man in the ocean. He's thrashing about trying to grab something to stay afloat. But Russia has increased the ops tempo, and it looks like last year the general staff wanted to turn off all the lights in Ukraine, but Putin sort of said, no, let's give it time. Putin now has signed off on that, and Ukraine has already lost 60% of its ability to generate power and sustain electricity. I suspect we're going to see that number creep up around 80-90% within the next 4 to 5 weeks. Then Ukraine's they're back living in the 18th century, and they're going to have to break out the candles.
Something else, Nima. I was just doing the math in my head, and I'm not too good at that anymore. But he said something about 2,000 tomahawks. I'm sorry. Last time I checked the inventory, it wasn't even quite that high for the United States. So I don't know where he's going. What's he going to do? Turn to Raytheon, Lockheed, whomever's doing them now, and say, redo that production line and come on, put them on. And he's tried that with some other weaponry, and they have not been very cooperative. They'd love to make the money, but they can't find the places in the country that will accept their ancillary activities to do it. Right. So they're stuck with the production lines that they have, which are basically at what we call LRIP at this time, low rate initial production numbers. They've gone down to where it's just barely profitable to make them. So I don't know where he's getting his information, but it's not from the people who tell the truth.
Larry, who's calling the shots in Europe? Who's behind the scene? Who has the leverage on Donald Trump
Well,
for the
that
case of
actually,
Ukraine?
I don't think anybody in Europe has any leverage over Trump. You remember, Trump's the one that made all them show up at the Gaza signing ceremony. You had Macron and Starmer. And Trump didn't even remember the Starmer was there. Maloney was there. They're all sitting there backbenchers. I describe that whole fiasco that took place in Sharm el Sheikh. It was like holding a wedding without the bride and groom being present. Okay, you didn't have the Palestinians and you didn't have the Zionists. So how can you have a peace agreement signing when the only one signing is Donald Trump? And everybody went along with this charade. The Europeans, nobody in Europe right now, particularly the big three, Friedrich Merz, Emmanuel Macron, Keir Starmer, and even Maloney in Italy, none of them have economies growing above 2%. They're all less than, most of them are less than 1.5 to below 1%. In contrast with the BRICS countries that were represented there at that meeting in Sharm el Sheikh, they're growing in excess of 4%. So they're doing fine economically. So it just goes back to show that the Europeans now are utterly, totally dependent upon the United States. And so they're not going to do anything to try to irritate Trump. They may not like Trump, but boy, they need the United States. Without U.S. money, they're going to be in trouble.
But they have something that would be interesting for Donald Trump and his administration. Here is what Pete Hegseth said, Carl, together with the Secretary General of NATO.
Part of that, of course, is Pearl, is the initiative where European countries buy U.S. weapons transferred to NATO for the fight in Ukraine to bring peace to that conflict. And if there's anything we've learned under President Trump, is the active application of peace through strength.
This video clip is not from 2 years ago, 1 year ago, 6 months ago. It was just the day before yesterday.
Oh, it's incredible that we let our leaders get away with lies like Hegseth is insinuating there. We can't even fulfill our commitments, some of them now quite long to be fulfilled, to Taiwan, which is arguably a more important move than giving weapons to Ukraine in the long term. We can't even fulfill our promises to Taiwan. Where is Petey going to activate the industrial base to the point where it can do what they're insinuating they're going to do for the Europeans and ultimately for Ukraine? They can't. So what are we doing here? We're playing a game. We're playing a game of rhetoric, and it's a dangerous game because we're not working assiduously behind the scenes on some kind of peace agreement. All Trump's doing is palavering. And he palavers one way on Monday and another way on Tuesday and forgets everything by Friday. So where are we going is my huge question. And it's involving a lot more than just Ukraine now, because it's very much looking like that the Southern Command commander stepped down, God bless his soul, or is going to stay until December, I understand it now, for the very same reasons that General Fred Warner left the same command when it was preparatory to Operation Just Cause. Well, we are preparing to do something in Venezuela with military force, and we're doing it based on an Israeli agent who just won the Nobel Prize for Peace and her coterie. This is incredible. Laura Loomer looms large in Trump's intelligence picture.
Larry, how important Venezuela is for Russia? We know that there is a strategic partnership between the two countries. And how do you find the tone of the Russians toward the case of Venezuela?
Well, I don't think they're going to, while they've signed a strategic agreement and have friendly relations with Venezuela, I don't see the Russians threatening to go to war with the United States over Venezuela. But I think they've armed them and given them about every chance opportunity to be able to resist. And I think the United States is making a very uh, calculated mistake and thinking that it can easily overwhelm. I mean, Trump yesterday announcing the covert action that the CIA is now involved to overthrow, to effect a regime change in Venezuela. It's like, I don't think he understands the meaning of the word covert because it's supposed to be a secret. You're not supposed to advertise it. It's supposed to be classified, done behind the scenes where you have plausible deniability. Now he's accepting full blame and full responsibility for this, and it's foolish. We can't beat the Houthis, and so we're going to take on Maduro in Venezuela. Good luck with that.
And Nima, I got to say, the Mossad must love that revelation because they've been in there trying to overthrow Maduro for at least a decade.
Yeah, yeah.
I think we can understand the behavior of Donald Trump because he wants to brag about it if they succeed in Venezuela. Because if he doesn't talk about it, who's going to take the credit for that?
Right.
It was me. I told you that I'm going to achieve something in Venezuela. But Carl, you mentioned the situation with the admiral, the commander admiral Alwyn,
Halsey,
yeah. He decided to step down. What is going on? It's just about him, or something bigger than that is going on within the military?
Well, I think the prima facie evidence, at least, is much the way it was for Fred Warner at the time of Just Cause. I think he has two problems with orders that have been coming down. And this is my guess, but I think it's an educated guess. He has problems with the extrajudicial killings on the high seas that have been taking place. And he has problems with what he is being briefed on with regard to possible military action against Venezuela. What I'm concerned with right now, I know his deputy fairly well. I don't know what they're calling, we used to call them political advisors. Now they're called diplomat in charge or something like that. Anyway, they got a highfalutin name now, but what it is a senior State Department career, usually, maybe not quite career, ambassador who comes for their final tour on active duty, if you will, to be an advisor to a combatant command commander. I'm wondering what she's saying right now. I'm wondering what all of that crew around this admiral are saying to themselves right now with regard to illegal orders that they have to this point been executing, and possibly an invasion of another country or military action against another country that really doesn't fit in their calculus. So how many more people are going to leave, or how disturbing is this going to be? I'm a little bit puzzled at his decision to stay until December, because I think the action is probably going to happen before December, or at least something that's visible. So it's confusing right now. I don't know exactly how to interpret it.
Larry, Zelensky is in Washington, and we've learned yesterday from the British outlet, they're talking about the British news, that media, and they're talking about Ukraine may decide to import the U.S. oil and gas, and they may use the pipeline they have in Ukraine to send them to other countries. Is that because how can they afford buying the U.S. oil and gas when Europeans are not capable of doing this?
Yeah, they're going to pay more. I mean, the U.S. gas and oil are more expensive. It's more costly. Nothing else, just shipping costs alone to get it out of the United States over there. So yeah, it makes no economic sense. And again, Trump has been engaged in a lot of prevarication, I guess we'll call it, fancy word for lying, claiming that India has promised them that they're not going to continue buying Russian oil. Not true. In fact, when they're buying the oil, they're paying for it with their own currency through China. So the Chinese currency is becoming sort of a new petrodollar right now. So this to cut a deal with Ukraine on gas and oil is just a reminder that even the resources that they had, because remember, Ukraine was, I think, ranked as like the 5th or 6th largest country in the world in terms of natural resources prior to the start of the special military operation. Now, a significant portion of those resources are now under the control of the Russians in the eastern part of the country. So, the the United States can send them gas and oil, but it's going to be a costly proposition for them.
And this is
Go
another Trump, extended middle finger to the hoax that is the climate lobby, because the ships that carry LNG, for example, from the United States are some of the most polluting ships in the world. They just give it off massively as they're going across the Atlantic. Not only does it cost more, but it also is more polluting. But they don't seem to care. They just don't seem to care.
Carl, which part is more important? I think in the mind of Russians, they tried. Many people are criticizing. Not many people. Few of experts are criticizing Russia to go to talk with the United States using their somehow economic, the economy of war. You're trying to be closer to the United States, making new deals in terms of improving their economy, both countries mutually improving their economies. But do you think that the economy is behind all of this mess, or there is something bigger than that, ideological going on in the United States, that they don't care about what Russia can bring to the table in terms of the economy, the Arctic, and all of those issues? They want Russia down. That doesn't matter for them, how much Russia can bring to the table. Carl, you.
Oh, okay. I don't know how to answer that except to say that I think we have a sizable body of both people, and when I say people, I mean the out in the hustings, who detest Russia, who hate Russia, because we've run a pretty good propaganda campaign to that effect. And then we have some people in the Congress who, for some reason or another, Lindsey Graham stands out immediately, detest Russia, absolutely detest it, and feel like it should be rubbed out or put into subservient status at a minimum. And then you have people like Trump who don't give a damn, really. They're just in it for the money. I increasingly believe that Donald Trump and his crew, Jared Kushner in particular, are in what they're doing, whatever it turns out to be, a coup d'etat, a totalitarianism, you name whatever the product might be, for money. Money is their elixir. Money is what they live for. It's what they breathe for. And I saw 2 days ago the money that Donald Trump has made off the presidency, both in his first term and so far in this second term. It's astronomical, the money that he's making, and the money that money is going to generate in the future, ad nauseum. This man is, if the art of the deal is money, then he is quintessentially the man for the money. And that's his whole administration. Money, 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 money. Now, people behind them, like the guy at OMB, who's the architect of Project 2025, and like Stephen Miller and Laura Loomer, that's a whole different ballgame. And the billionaires behind them, like Pete Thiel behind J.D. Vance, that's a whole different ballgame. But Trump doesn't even care about that ballgame. What he does for them is incidental. It's serendipitous. And they like that. And that's why they support him. But that's the looming danger to the country, these people behind him, not him per se. But money is his quintessential objective. Look at Kushner. Go back and look at Kushner's remarks in front of the people that were there and understand that is a quintessential expression of Donald Trump's program. Money, money. And I will call anybody in the world an angel, and I will call any angel a devil in order to make money, period. That's Donald Trump's motivation, money.
Larry, your take on that. The ideology of those people who are, the main decision makers in the United States, or Donald Trump's push for making a deal, that could come, the economy can, the economy of Russia could bring to the United States, could somehow benefit the United States?
No, they're not even thinking about that. Look, um, Russia does have some critical resources that the United States needs, and as long as Russia and China continue to cooperate economically, they can inflict some serious damage on the U.S. economy. Uh, Trump has been picking a fight, both economically and financially, particularly with China, but also with Russia. So, Russia and China. We saw Trump make this claim the other day that people are leaving BRICS. Not true. It's just the opposite. What Trump and his actions is making the case for why BRICS is necessary and why these countries want to continue with it.
Bingo.
Because they're not going to be bullied by the United States anymore. They're not going to be held hostage to a U.S. dollar. And Trump's the one blinking now. When he's calling this, he puts he's bluffs with threats, but when it comes time to put up or shut up, he shuts up. He goes off and pursues another outrageous lie or claim. So this isn't Trump he has not kept his promise to put America first. He has instead engaged in subterfuge by making Israel first. The United States takes the back bench. It's secondary. And until that changes, and the only way I think that's going to change is Trump's going to have to suffer some pretty major political defeats up ahead. And maybe the Democrats understand that. Of course, they've not demonstrated any kind of great intelligence either on their part. They seem to be as self-destructive as Trump.
Yeah.
Colonel Donald Trump tweeted, he posted on Social Truth, he said, if Hamas continues to kill people in Gaza, which wasn't the deal, we will have no choice but to go in and kill them. He said we, but when he was asked, but who's we, here is what he answered.
That if they kept killing people in Gaza, we would have no choice but to go in and kill them. So do you mean U.S. forces would go in and take out Hamas?
No, I didn't say who would go in, but somebody will go in. It's not going to be us. We won't have to. There are people very close, very nearby that will go in. They'll do the trick very easily, but under our auspices.
What is this, Hamas killing people?
This is preparation for the extended war that's coming inevitably. And the person he's talking about is going to do it for him is none other than, are you ready for this? Bibi Netanyahu. They have not kept an hour of this ceasefire up to the present time I'm talking to you. And I predict beyond that. They have not kept up a single hour without killing a Palestinian or something invidious and in violation of the ceasefire, as I understand it. At the same time, they are making it look as if Hamas on a daily basis is violating the ceasefire, whether it's their inability to return hostages that are under 100 meters of rubble that they created, or whether it's they're killing people who are trying to disturb the ceasefire and trying to take out Hamas, which the IDF couldn't do. And the IDF is backing these people. It's a nightmare for anybody trying to figure out what's going on in the region that's most critical. And I mean by that Gaza City and points south. Meanwhile, they're trying to feed, and they're doing a reasonably decent job because they've, as I understand it, they put the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, on complete hold. And they're letting people who know how to do this come in there and do it. So people are actually getting fed and they're getting a little bit of water, and it's increasing the morale just a little bit. But Bibi Netanyahu has no intent whatsoever to honor this ceasefire. He's never honored a ceasefire in his freaking life. And so we're just waiting for it to resume, and we're waiting for the excuses. And if you read even Haaretz, if you read their newspaper, you see that the exultations over the hostage return, the political dynamics that are somewhat changing because of that to be more positive for Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, Netanyahu, and the other cretins, and you understand what's going on with the body of Israelis, which have never, in majority, left this cretin policy of genocide, then you understand it's all working out for Bibi right now in the short term. Tactically, it's working out for him. And he's not going to give that up. And then he's eventually going to go to war with Iran. That may have been changed in terms of its time calculus. I understand that the new sycophant Central Command commander, I say new, I mean, he took over from Cirillo, but he's not any better, has made some recommendations with regard to the timing and with regard to what they actually start out doing to Iran. But nonetheless, it's going to happen. Maybe a little later than I've been initially predicting, but it's going to happen. And Bibi's going to have what he wants, regime change in Iran, according to his calculus. But more important for Bibi, this deepening and extension of the war and keeping it hot in Gaza even and in the West Bank is going to make sure he survives. And that's his sole goal right now, is to survive.
Larry, we know that from the Russian source, the Iranian source, we've learned that Iran has received MiG-29, the latest version of MiG-29, and also the first batch of Su-35. So from Russia, it seems that Iran is ready. Iran knows that they're going to attack them. How soon they would attack Iran, in your opinion?
Well, yesterday, here in the hotel where I'm staying, I saw al-Jilani, al-Shada. He was here in Moscow meeting with President Putin, asking the Russians to stay. You remember, last October when Bashar al-Assad fell, a year ago, there was all this celebration about, man, this is a black eye for Russia. Russia's being driven out of Syria. Yay, West. Al-Shara is, even though he's put in power by the West, man, he's Putin said, hey, you guys stick around and would you help us get the Israelis out of southern Lebanon, southern Syria? So you got that, number one. Ali Larijani showed up yesterday as well for meetings with Putin. So the Iranians are consulting with Russia, and Russia, I'm sure, is sharing intelligence about what the plans are for the United States and for Israel with respect to launching renewed attacks. And so in this go round, Iran's not going to be caught with its pants down around its ankles. They're going to be ready and prepared. And with that, my friend, I got to take off. I'm sorry to bail out on you early.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry.
I leave you in the very capable, wise hands of Colonel Wilkerson.
Do svidaniya.
Yeah, do svidaniya. Okay, bye-bye.
Just to re-emphasize what Larry was saying there, I understand that we actually had a conversation, military to military. The IDF and the American military are like that now, like lips and teeth, as Mao said. Especially this pair of Cirillo and now Baker, I think it is, the new Central Command commanders. And they are lusting for this attempt on Iran. The U.S. as well as the Israelis. I think we have to look at this really closely, though, because I've been involved with countries like you were just suggesting that are getting top-of-the-line fighters and top-of-the-line new equipment training teams and training and work. In fact, I was somewhat involved in the F-14 Tomcats that went to Iran way back when, It's not the easiest thing in the world to do in terms of flying those aircraft indigenously. That is to say, native Iranians flying those aircraft. It's a year or so before you really become able to get up in the air and hold your own with someone who's fairly capable. And I got to admit this, in terms of the Air Force, I have no respect for them at all, bombing civilians mercilessly, but they are good. They're very good. And many of them have been to our Top Gun school. Many of them dictate the policies of that school. So that's not really a comparison of the quality. unless the Russians are flying them. Now, if the Russians are flying them, at least 2 or 3 per squadron or whatever, then you got a different ballgame because they're good. They're very good. They're as good as us or better. So, but what I'm saying is it's not all that much of an enhancement unless it goes on for a period of time. The other things, though, that Russia has given them, like the air defense radars and the air defense missiles and such, are quite formidable. And Israel will have to be thinking really hard, and they already are from their previous experience, about flying their aircraft anywhere in those air defense envelopes. So it is a different ballgame. But I do think it'll still be a pretty good struggle. I don't know if you saw, Iran will come out on top. There's no question in my mind on that. But I don't know if you saw the revelations that took place over the last 72 hours or so about Site 81 in Israel. Site 81 is probably next to 8,200, maybe even more than 8,200. It's really the center of Israeli intelligence and warfighting capability. It was under I think it's the Da Vinci apartment complex. The Israelis are using their civilians to disguise where they are and to take the punishment when the punishment comes. This is unconscionable, but this is what they do. And they argue that, well, we don't have a lot of land. Well, you have more land than that. But anyway, they know where that is. They struck it before, and they will strike it this time with hypervelocity, what I will call earth penetrating missiles, and they will destroy it. Now, I don't know if Israel has the capability to, as the Iranians did with their nuclear facilities, move it now really quickly because Mossad knows they've been outed. But that's the first place I would hit if I were Iran. I'd take that out. Now you're going to take a lot of civilians with it, but I mean, this is, win or take all in this next war. So Iran has some real incentives to destroy Israel, utterly destroy it.
Larry, in the case of Iran, do you really, what's the gain for the Trump administration if they attack Iran? Because after all, you have to think of it. What is the outcome for you?
I think the answer to that question, Nima, is in Trump's recent behavior toward Miriam Adelson and the question he asked her jokingly, but it wasn't really a joke. I think Trump was actually expressing some of his distaste for Miriam, as well as doing what he had to do politically with regard to her, praising her and so forth, and asking her which country she was most loyal to. Now, Sheldon, her husband, would have had no problem answering that question. He said, America, America. And he didn't mean Israel, but America, America is what he would have said. But she actually had to think about it. Well, that sort of sums it all up. Trump will have no choice. He'll have no choice but to go in to save Israel. And Netanyahu knows that. And then, as I've said before, he won't be saving Israel so much as he'll be destroying the empire.
Do you feel that Israel has done something, in terms of their defense capabilities, in terms of their offensive capabilities? They have done something different, something, unique to go after Iran, to start a new round of war with Iran, or they're pretty much in the same place?
I don't think they're pretty much in the same place. One of Israel's strengths is it's never in the same place twice. But I do think they probably are victims of their own arrogance, and they're victims of their own truly existential dependence on the United States. And we are guilty of having given them that feeling because we are so tight with them, lips and teeth, like I said. And the two Central Command commanders we've had, Cirillo and this new guy, not so new now, but they are quintessential examples of that. They are sold out to Israel. They are sold out to Israel, and they're sold out to their own desire for fame and fortune. I can't say it any other way, to be the ones who brought down the Iranian regime finally. I mean, after all, this is, for Lindsey Graham and John Bolton and people like that, this is a half-century long plus struggle. We've been trying to bring down the regime in Iran for years, ever since the hostage crisis. And a lot of these people are psychologically wrapped up in that. Lindsey Graham, for example, he is absolutely, distaste is in his mouth all the time for Iranians because of the hostages and the damage they did to the empire and to its image. He will not rest until he's in his grave or until Iran's regime is changed. And there are other Americans like that too. And some of them are in Trump's government. I think Hegseth is that way also. I don't give Hegseth credit for anything very solid for any period of time. He's a sycophant, basically. But if I have to determine his position with regard to Iran, it's regime change. And you'd be surprised how many members of the Democratic Party are the same way. Joe Biden was that way. So, you know, it's anybody's bet what we are going to do, but I bet that we're going to go in whole hog with Israel. And as I said, it's going to unravel us because it's not going to work unless we put troops on the ground, and then troops on the ground is going to be ultimately a disaster.
Looking at Israel today, Carl, we know from what's going on, when I see the Iranian media, I see the way that the officials are talking about the war with Israel. They know what would be the reaction on their part, but comparing Iran to Israel, it's somehow unimaginable to me, because Israel is just a little, country. How you can imagine that this country can go against Iran? And the level of destruction that they can cause in Israel, that would literally bring down the Israeli economy. Literally.
Well, you're really talking about, I think now, if the figures I'm getting are correct, and I think they are, we're talking about maybe 5.5 million Jewish Israelis, because about 1.5 million have left. We're talking about another 7.2, 7.3 million non-Israeli citizens of Israel who are just kind of sitting there waiting to see what's going to happen. Most of them are Arabs or Christians or others. I think what you've got, though, is a country of 370 million people, because you have to add the 350 million Americans to it. And as long as that's the situation, they're going to be very daredevil. They're going to be very capable. They're going to be, with Netanyahu in particular, very interested in completing the game, if you will. And they don't complete the game. And America, in its neoconservative regions, believes the same thing until there's regime change in Iran. After all, we have legislation in the Congress passed by quite a sizable majority, too, to overthrow the regime in Iran. Doesn't say how, but it is to overthrow the regime in Iran. So that's what gives Israel so much power. There's no other way to dissect that except to say the power is in not the skill of Israel to defend itself. That's what they're always bragging about. Not the skill of Israeli scientists to build great weapons. That's what they're always bragging about to the world so they can sell more weapons to them. But the real reason is who's behind them. That's what gives them their stature. That's what gives that little pipsqueak country that big voice.
Donald Trump asked the president of Israel to pardon Netanyahu. Do you think that was because, if that would be the case and they decide to pardon Netanyahu, that would facilitate Trump's position? Somehow that could avoid the war between Iran and Israel?
First thing I thought when I heard him say it, that was the first thought that entered my mind. The guy has got some brains because he's saying, pardon him, so he won't have that particular excuse to go to war with Iran and drag me into it too. I think he was actually communicating that to Bibi, but Bibi's not listening. Bibi doesn't give a hang for Donald Trump, really. In fact, truth be told, I think Bibi detests Donald Trump.
Actually, they said that.
You know, the reason he didn't come to the conference, he gave this excuse about a Jewish holiday and everything, was because he did not want to seem to his erstwhile friends in the region, if he has any friends, he did not want to seem to be groveling, to be subservient to Donald Trump. So he wasn't going to go, and he wasn't going to be there. I mean, that was so obvious, it hurt to look at it. And Donald Trump taking that excuse, had I been the president, I'd have said, you get your ass there. I don't care about your holiday. You get your ass there. But, Trump's not going to do that.
The Jerusalem Post wrote an article that it says Trump's friendship leaves Israel with little room to act as it needs. It seems that they prefer to have some sort of division within the United States. They can, they prefer this sort of balance, going to Democrats, Republicans, and somehow the sort of unity they see in the United States, not the unity, they're mostly from the same party, Republican Party, that make the situation worse for Israel to bargain, to manipulate the situation in the United States. Is that the case?
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think they also are becoming, I won't say desperate, but they're becoming very un-Israeli in their confidence in their own efforts to propagandize the United States. And I have to say that Charlie Kirk's assassination and what's going on about that assassination in the aftermath has done irreparable damage to Israel's relations with America all across the board. If you've seen the polls, I mean, it's Republicans, Democrats, Independents, all of them. Democrats are more pronounced than the others, but still the combined percentages are 60 plus that now think the relationship the U.S. has with Israel is injurious to the United States, is detrimental to the United States. That's only going to grow, no matter how much money they employ, no matter how many of our tax dollars they send back to propagandize us. That's going to continue to grow, maybe a little more slowly than it would otherwise, but nonetheless, they're not going to be able to stem that tide. So they're getting a little bit desperate. And when you get desperate, you start fracturing a little bit. They're already got fractures in their coalition with Ben-Gvir and Smotrich over here, Netanyahu trying to stay somewhere in the center, and a few people that would like to see Netanyahu gone, but simply would continue what he's doing anyway, but they would do it more low key. So it's a difficult thing to parse as to where Israel is going to go if they lose Netanyahu. I think that's a question that everybody should be pondering in the diplomatic community and the security community in America. Where is Israel going to go? Let's just say this. What if he were assassinated tomorrow morning? Not that he will be. He has more security than you can shake a stick at. But let's just say hypothetically, he had a heart attack or something like that. Where would Israel go in those circumstances? And I can't answer that question. My tendency in answering it would be to say, you'll have the same thing, just on a lower burner. You'll have exactly the same thing. They will continue to kill the Gazans as fast as they can, and they will begin what they have now started, but very carefully, because the rubble is so deep, it's going to be extremely dangerous, settling. They've already got people moving into the northern part of Gaza and beginning to clear the rubble for settlements. Now, I was told yesterday that Smotrich and particularly this one other guy, his name escapes me right now, but he's kind of in charge of it on the ground. They kind of held up their hands and said, man, this is impossible. We can't do this. We've got shovels and picks and bulldozers, but this is going to require mainline construction crews. You've made such rubble. So they've slowed that down a little bit, but that's still in the wings. It's still in the wings. They want to slowly but inexorably colonize or settle and kick out the remaining Palestinians, all of Gaza, starting in the north. So I don't know where that's going to go, but I don't think it's going to go any differently with the new government should Netanyahu be suddenly gone, except maybe slower and more methodically rather than so crushingly brutal.
I really believe that with the case of Gaza, the tsunami is not behind, it's coming. When they go there and find, remove the rubble, remove these, destroyed buildings, they're going to see a lot of things
Nima, I think they're going to pave it over. I think they're going to pave it over. I think they're going to bury 100,000 Palestinian women and children and some men. under the rubble. That's what I think they're going to do. I think they're going to throw up their arms and claim to us and to the UN and others that there's no other way to do it. And maybe they'll go in and look for the hostages until they're exhausted their possibilities. But other than that, I think they're going to leave these people under, and they're going to say there's no one under because the health ministry said this was the casualty rate. And those casualties are roughly accounted for. They're not going to look for 100,000. They're just going to pave over it. It's going to be their grave.
Yeah. That would be
horrible.
Horrible. Yeah.
Yeah. Horrible. How do you
no
say
one
that?
would know.
How do you say that in Portuguese?
What?
Horrible.
Horrible.
Whoa.
Larry, we know that in the United States, I don't know if you see the U.S. Representative Seth Moulton. He's a Democrat. He said that he will,
former Marine. Yeah.
He will be returning donation from the Israeli lobby AIPAC. And he said that he will no longer accept their support. Do you feel that the Democratic Party, because we know that the AIPAC they don't care about if you're Republican or Democrat. They're going to help you if you support their cause, you support their, their pro-Israeli ideology. How do you see the wave of, these people who have decided not to take support from AIPAC as Israeli lobby? Is that going to spread within the United States?
I hope so, but I see that bringing out AIPAC's big guns and lots of money, and there's plenty of billionaires that will give them the money to buy off those candidates ultimately, or that failing, and I think they will fail with Seth. I know Seth a little bit. He's a very, I would call him a rare individual in the United States Congress. I've lost a little faith in him because he's not done all that I thought he was going to do, but still, I think he has a good ethical heart. They will go against these people and fund their opponents to the max, and they will try their standard technique to defeat them. And it remains to be seen who will be successful. But I do think the momentum is growing in both political parties. And oddly enough, I think it's growing most rapidly in the Republican Party to defy AIPAC, like Tom Massey has done all along from Kentucky. And that's the end of Israel's influence if it's true. It may take some time, but or it could happen in a blinding flash with the midterms. We could see, if the right candidates are in place, we could see a massive turnover of people who don't give a farthing for Israel, and in fact might be even opposed to it.
One of the main concerns, Larry, in Iran, in Russia, and I see growing in China and maybe in India, is that who's in charge in the United States? Because Donald Trump came out yesterday that said India promised him not to buy Russian oil, which later on rejected by Indian government and said that we didn't do. There was no phone call between Modi and Donald Trump that he's referring to. And the other thing is that the argument he has about BRICS and the future of BRICS and the reality of BRICS. Here is what he said.
Combination like BRICS. I told anybody wants to be in BRICS, that's fine, but we're going to put tariffs on your nation. Everybody dropped out. They're all dropping out of BRICS. BRICS was an attack on the dollar. And I said, you want to play that game, I'm going to put tariffs on all of your product coming into the U.S. They said, like I said, we're dropping out of BRICS. And BRICS is like, they don't even talk about it anymore.
Is that really his understanding of BRICS?
He's lying through his teeth. They're pretty solid on 11. They have 6 standing in the wings and 5 behind those 6. So we're looking at a potential for 30 countries. Now, I have no doubt that the United States could bring its remaining, and here's the key word, residual sanctions power, because it no longer is what it was. Ask anyone at OFAC who tells you the truth, and they'll tell you it ain't what it was. And hurt a couple of the countries and maybe get them to, at least in the interim, recant and not pursue BRICS membership formally. But they're being very careful. The leadership is being very careful about who they do welcome in, because they don't want, kind of fly-by-night countries. They want people committed to it. India for a long time, BRI, India for a long time was very on the fence from time to time about being a formally recognized member, as have a couple of other countries. Brazil probably was the most stalwart. Even Bolsonaro, they were the most stalwart in terms of not backing away from it. And I don't recall exactly what Bolsonaro's position was with respect to it, but I think there was some, just as there is countries like Indonesia, some consternation about what it means to back away from the United States, surely, but there's also consternation about what it means to be allied, as it were, with some of these other countries. And some of the other countries that come to mind include China, because there's mixed emotions out there in the developing world. Basically, I find it's positive, but sometimes I find negative stories that are so capitalized on by our propaganda that it does do damage to China's image with that particular base road initiative or whatever. So it's a battle in the hustings right now for influence in the world, but we're losing. There's no question in my mind that we're losing, and he's lying through his teeth there. The impetus in the world right now is to back away from the empire. Do whatever you can to protect yourself as you retreat, and realize you're probably going to be hammered if you become too obvious in that retreat, and do things that will keep you from getting hurt too badly. But nonetheless, they're retreating. And there is no greater example of this. And I'd love to get in a press conference with Donald Trump and ask him this, than the fact that the oil that is now flowing so copiously in Central Asia, in the Asian continent in general, and particularly out of Russia toward China, and contemplated in the future. You don't contemplate billion-dollar pipelines unless you're pretty serious, because it starts with a lot of money up front being denominated in yuan. Because sooner or later, Riyadh is going to look around and it's going to say, and OPEC is going to say, look, we've been denominated the oil market in dollars for a long time, ever since before World War II. Pound than the dollar. About time to change. And they're going to change. And overnight, the United States is going to be sucking hind tit. Big time. That's when the U.S. dominance of the world, financially, economically, and in terms of SWIFT and other arrangements like that, that's when it unravels and falls apart. And it won't be week after week. It'll be almost instantaneously. We'll wake up one morning and we will truly be broke.
Is there any room for negotiation, for diplomacy with the Trump administration, or they need to, force the countries like Russia, China, Iran to react, and then they find that, no, they're going to react. Let's talk with them. What is that, Larry? What is the position of diplomacy in today's America under the Trump administration?
Well, you could call it a manifestation on a global scale of Trump's book, which he didn't write, Art of the Deal, where you establish an overwhelmingly powerful position before you even go in and talk. And then you use that position to batter your opponent until he gives up, she gives up, and accepts your position, or a compromise with your position that you can accept. Although Trump, I don't think, even knows how to define compromise. So that's the way we've done things. It's called bullyism, it's called being the world's biggest bully. That's Trump. That's Donald Trump. And he bullies with words. He bullies with actions. He bullies domestically. He bullies internationally. and it's going to stop working. And it's going to stop working before his term comes much more into fruition. And that's when I'm really worried. That's when I'm worried that what they talked about at Quantico, using the military to attack their political opponents, generating with ICE and its untoward actions towards civilians, an insurrection that they can call an insurrection, invoking the Insurrection Act, and then using the military to take over the country. And the only thing standing in the way of that will be first the military itself, and then the American people. That's a crunch point we just really should not want to come to, but I fear we might have to. And it's going to coincide with the United States disappearing from the world scene as a major economic and financial power. So this could be 1929, 1930, 1931, 32, all over again, but on steroids, with absolutely abysmal leadership. That's the scenario for destruction of the empire. And I got to run.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Carl. Great pleasure, as always, having you on.
Good to be with you, and always good
See
to
you
be with your cohort in Moscow. Take care.
See you. Bye-bye.